Hello everyone, this is a course to learn the basics of C programming language. Today's class is about control statements in C. C programming includes numerous statements which run in order from beginning to end. Therefore, you must control the sequential flows of the program to achieve the desired results. The statement used at this time is called a control statement. First, we will learn about conditional statement and iteration statement, and then additional conditional statement such as continue and break. After that, let's wrap up the class with practice. First, let's learn about conditional statements. Conditional statements are statements that control the execution of separate commands based on the results of a given conditional expression. Typical form of conditional statements include if statement, if-else statement, if-else if-else statement, and switch statement. An if statement executes a given statement if the result of the conditional expression is true. If false, it executes nothing. If the condition, I have a test tomorrow, is true, the statement, study at home, will be executed, and if the condition is false, the statement will not be executed. The grammar of the if statement is as follows. You can see that the statement in the block is indented to the right based on the brackets. Increasing the readability of code through indentation is called indent, and it is recommended to indent all code if possible. The following example uses an if statement 3 times in a row to compare the number entered by the user to the number 5 and output the result. If num is 3, only the first if statement is true and the rest of the if statement is false, so only the comment statement in the first if statement is executed. The else statement used with the if statement, as opposed to the if statement, executes the given statement if the result of the given conditional expression is false. Unlike the previous example, the command hang out with friends can be executed even when I have a test tomorrow is false. The grammar of the else statement is as follows. The example that we solved earlier using only the if statement, this time we solve it using the if-else statement. The code is easier to read using else. However, there is still a limitation that only one condition can be considered. If you try to solve multiple conditions with only if and else statements, the code will be complicated. Else if statement can solve these problems. An else if statement can have a conditional expression like an if statement. Unlike if and else statements, which can be used only once, else if statements can be used many times so they can express complex conditions. You can now see that multiple conditions can be controlled in a single conditional statement. In addition, if you look at the example on the right, the code is simpler than the previous example where the if and else statements were superimposed. Do you remember what you learned about the ternary operator last time? The if-else statement can be represented simply like this. The code is more efficient and concise when using the ternary operator than when using the if-else statement. However, sometimes it can harm readability, so be careful to use it in the right place. Lastly, switch statement is a condition statement that causes the program to perform different commands depending on the result of a given condition value. It is more readable than if-else statements, and the compiler can optimize easily, so it is faster. However, only char, short, int, and enumerate types are available for the conditions of the switch statement. Below is the basic form of the switch statement. Let's understand more by looking at the following example. This example is an example of guessing the value of num. The comment statement to be performed is different for each case of num, which is a condition of the switch. In this case, num is 2, so it corresponds to case 2. Therefore, a statement outputting input is 2 is performed. It is important to note that Each case and default clause must contain break. The break keyword allows the entire switch statement to exit after the case or default clause corresponding to the condition value is executed. What would happen if there was no break in the switch? Guess the execution result of the code below. The results are as follows. Is it the same result as you thought? There's no break statement in the case statement, so it can be seen that all case and default statements are being executed after case 2 is executed. Break must be used to prevent this from happening. Iteration statement is a statement that controls the execution of the same comment over and over again a certain number of times within a program. When, do while, and for are typical iteration statements. First, while statement repeats the given statement until a certain condition is met. It first determines whether the conditional expression is true, and if true, executes the internal statement. Once you've executed all the statements inside, you're back to the conditional expression, and you're going to decide if it's true again. The example below is eating pizza until you are not hungry. Iteration statements executed repeatedly through the inspection of the expression are called loops. This example is an example of repeating if I is less than num. If this while statement is executed normally, I increases by 1 every time the while statement is repeated, and the while statement is repeated 5 times as follows. However, if both I and num do not change in a loop, the condition of the while statement is always true, so it is trapped in an infinite loop that cannot escape. Therefore, when writing while statements, you should pay attention to conditions and loop so that they are not trapped in an infinite loop. The while statement checks the conditional expression first before entering the loop. However, the do while statement first runs a loop and then checks the conditional expression. In other words, the do while statement executes a loop once, unconditionally, regardless of the result of the conditional expression. If the example above was a while statement, there wouldn't be a single output. However, the do while statement unconditionally executes a loop once, regardless of the result of the conditional expression. Next, for statement execute the loop when the result of the conditional expression is true, just like the while statement. It uses initial, conditional, and incremental expressions to make them more concise. Let's take a closer look through examples and grammar. First of all, if you look at the basic form, you can see that the form has initial, conditional, and incremental, unlike the while statement with only conditions. Let's look at the example. This for statement is a repeat statement that repeats while I is less than num, starting with 0 and increasing by 1 every iteration. As soon as I is equal to or greater than num, it escapes the repeat. So far, we have looked at the conditional and repeated statements. Repeat statements typically execute all statements in the loop when they enter the loop through the inspection of the conditional expression until the next conditional expression is examined. However, continue and break statements allow the user to directly control the flow of these common loops. First, continue statement is used within a loop, skipping the rest of the loop and moving on to the next conditional expression. It is used to handle exceptions to specific conditions. The for statement in the example is repeated for 100 or less, with I increasing by 1, starting from 0. In this case, if I is divided by the exception number and the remainder is 0, the printf statement below is not executed by facing the continue statement, So this example is an example of outputting only numbers that are not multiples of the exception number. Next, break statements are also used within a loop to completely terminate the iterative statement and then execute the statement immediately after the iterative statement. That is, when you want to leave the iterative completely, regardless of the outcome of the conditional expression's judgment within the loop. In this example, the condition of the while statement is 1. Because this condition is always true, this form is a representative example of an infinite loop. However, if the start number and the end number are the same inside the while statement, you can see that there is a code that breaks and exits the while statement. So far, we have learned about conditional statements, iterative statements, and how to control the program using continue and break. Now, let's solve the questions using the things we learned earlier and wrap up the class. The contents of this exercise are as follows. Let's make a program that receives one positive integer and determines whether the number you receive is prime number. For example, 67,428 is not a prime number and 7 is a prime number. Stop the video for a moment and take plenty of time to figure it out. Did you solve the practice problem successfully? There were 2 key points in this problem. First, you should use correct range for the loops, such as while or for. Also, you should think about when to break out the loop. Let's see the correct answer. First, we input num using the printf function and scanf function we learned in the first time. Then, starting with 2 and add 1 by 1 until it is equal to or larger than num, check whether num is a multiple of I. If num is divided by I and the remainder is 0, that means num is not a prime number. On the contrary, if the size of I becomes equal to num after turning the form, it means that there is no factor of num among the numbers smaller than num, so num means that num is a prime number. This is the end of today's class. Good job! See you next time.